welcome to this week's Ask Charlie. It is wet, it is miserable, so I decided to come in here and chat to you. Now this is confession time. This is something that I have ummed and ahed about sharing with you all for a very, very long time. Well, a year or so, to be honest. And I share these personal things in the hope that it might help you or somebody you know. So that is why I am revealing all about this and sharing it with you now. Now, I used to be a smoker. I stopped smoking over 2 years ago, but I had a battle for so many years to try and stop smoking. And I would stop and I would start, and of course I stopped when I had all of the children, but then I would find myself at a party and had a couple of glasses of wine, somebody was having a cigarette, and I thought it was a good idea to have one too. And I wasn't a social smoker, I was a secret smoker. And I would skulk off and hide in all sorts of places to smoke. And I couldn't understand why I did it, why I couldn't stop doing it. I mean, smoking is seriously addictive, but I hated myself for smoking. It really repulsed me. I was ashamed of myself. I hated myself for smoking, and I had tried absolutely everything to stop for quite a few years. I even went to Alan Carr's easy way to stop smoking clinic in London. I think I was 23, and it worked for a few weeks, and then I was back smoking. And I never felt comfy smoking in front of other people. I would always slope off and skulk behind a corner or what have you. And once I'd been was a parent, I would hide from the children. And I didn't smoke a lot, but I couldn't stop. And it was, if anyone else has been there, you know, whether that you might be able to understand it, because it's so difficult. Anyway, this is just a complete brain dump, so you're just going to have to bear with me with this confession time, and it's probably going to be quite rambly, but I really hope me sharing this is going to help, you know, even if it helps one other person, then that is great, to become free from all nicotine. I really didn't want to replace it with anything else, but as I mentioned, I had tried everything. I was hypnotized numerous times, I had therapy, and I would stop for a period of time, and then something would happen that would trigger me to go back to it. And I didn't feel like I had the strength of character to resist. It was always there. Even when I wasn't smoking, it was like in the back of my mind. People talk about like food noise. It's the same when you're addicted to something until you're totally, totally free of it. And my mother smoked. My mother died from smoking, age 66. And I was so ashamed that I smoked. I didn't like her when I was growing up for being a smoker. She smoked all over the place, you know, in the car, in the house. You did in the 80s. Well, she did. And I hated it. I was repulsed by it. And then one day I found myself reaching for one of her cigarettes, a lighter, and I skulked off to the end of the garden and I had a cigarette. And I couldn't understand why I'd started and what had triggered it and what had caused it. And I really couldn't understand why I couldn't stop. And I just was so ashamed of myself. And oh yeah, yeah. Maybe you can understand, but I hated it. I just didn't feel like that person, and I didn't want to be that person, but I couldn't stop it, and it was really, really hard. So to cut a very long story short, Simon said to me, So for those of you that don't know, I had quite a difficult childhood. It was not an easy home life. It was easier in the early days, and there were times when my parents were very happy, but there were times when they were really, really unhappy. And there was tension, there was angst, there was screaming and shouting. For a period of time, I didn't dare invite people over because of the shouting from my father. And it wasn't a happy home. And then my parents had an awful breakup, divorce. I've talked about that in various other videos. And Simon said to me a number of years ago, darling, I really think you need to address your relationship with your father and how you feel about it, and maybe, you know, some therapy, because when he dies, it's going to be hard. And I had a lot of therapy over the years, but not specifically to my relationship with my father and my childhood trauma. I'd had sort of other types of therapy, but not specifically. Anyway, the time felt right to address it. And this was gosh, 3.5 years ago. Dad died February last year, and I went to see Kate Finn. Kate Finn is a hypnotherapist. She lives locally. She's amazing. And her and I had worked on other things. We had tried to address my smoking and it hadn't worked. But I went to her and I specifically said, look, Kate, I have this anxiety about my father. I get really anxious when I know I'm going to see him. He makes me feel like this. I really struggle in my relationship with him, and the past has really affected me, and I want to do some work on overcoming that. And we did specific work on that. And I also have another therapist called Estelle, and I've worked with Estelle for many years, and mainly to do with my relationship with my mother. But Estelle and I also did some work about my father and my relationship with him. So the two in conjunction together, Estelle and Kate, were really helpful. And often when you have therapy, you're like, you don't feel indifferent, like what's changed? And what had changed? I don't know what had changed, but we did the work, and I carried on my life. And then some time later, a good period of time later, I woke up one morning, I looked at my emails on my phone, and Audible had sent me an email to say that I had some credits available and would I like to use them. And I thought, no, why not? I love an audiobook. So I clicked through and it came up with Alan Carr's boot camp, Stop Smoking. I can't remember the exact words, but I will leave the title linked here on the screen and in the description of this video in case you're interested. Now, I had listened to Alan Carr's Easy Way on Audible to stop smoking I'd listened to it probably about 5 times, and it worked for a period of time. And then I would get triggered either from being at a party, or something really emotional would happen, like, I don't know, a friend's husband was diagnosed with cancer. I was so upset about that, I started smoking again. How ridiculous is that? I know. I'd actually stopped smoking when Mum died, and driving down to her house, I stopped and bought a packet of cigarettes because I thought, I can't do this without my crutch. And that's how I saw cigarettes, as my crutch to get through stressful things. I would just go off, hide, have a cigarette, and calm myself down. Now, what's really interesting is Estelle, my therapist, and I were in person. We had a session in person, and she said, Charlie, I want you to pretend you're anxious and you're having a cigarette. I want to watch what you do. And she said, when you're stressed, you hold your breath. And when you hold your breath, you feel awful. When you have a cigarette, you are regulating your breathing, and actually it's making you feel better. Actually, if you just controlled your breathing and did breath work, you would feel 1,000 times better. But the cigarette is regulating your breathing, which is why you think it's making you feel better. And that was really interesting. And she told me that very, very early on when we worked together. But I still, when I was stressed, would turn to a cigarette. And I just really battled. Anyway, this day, Audible served me these credits. I went on and it said this boot camp, stop smoking. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to try it. I'm going to give it a whirl. And I did it. And I stopped smoking. And I haven't picked up a cigarette since. And it is such a huge thing for me. And I didn't want to film this video 3 weeks after, 3 months after, 6 months after. I wanted to know that I was free from cigarettes. I've gone through some huge traumas since I stopped smoking. The first one was actually when we thought that my dad had died and the police had to knock his door down, and I was standing outside his property with somebody that was smoking. They had quite a few cigarettes while we were standing there waiting for the police to knock the door down, and I did think in a moment, oh, cigarette could be really helpful now. And I was like, no, how is a cigarette going to help you in this instant? It's just going to make you feel guilty. It's going to make you feel awful. It's going to give you a terrible head rush, and it's not going to help you at all. So don't even think about that, girl. And then obviously my father died, very traumatic, and you know, the stress of moving house and all of those things. I haven't felt like I needed to turn to cigarettes at all, and it has been amazing. And I think that's why I wanted to sit down and share this with you all, because what had changed? Well, let me share this with you first. So a few summers ago, I think it was 2 summers ago, and I had stopped smoking. I was listening to an audiobook by Lucinda Gordon-Lennox called Nobody is Broken. And in that book, Lucinda asks you to take yourself to something that has been traumatic and to think about it and to think about how you feel and how you cope. I can't remember the exact ins and outs of it because we're going back a few years, but I'll leave it linked in the video, Lucinda's book. I can highly recommend it. Now, Lucinda talked in there about trauma and different types of trauma. And unless you have overcome and worked through that trauma, you are not going to be totally free from whatever it is that you have resorted to. So whether that is alcohol, drugs, shopping addiction, whatever it might be, cigarettes, you need to get to the root cause of why before you can actually be totally free of the thing that you have used to cope with the trauma. And my coping mechanism to my childhood was cigarettes. And until I had done the work to leave the past behind, to accept my past, to accept that that has shaped me, that has happened, but to be free from it, I couldn't stop smoking. And it wasn't until I listened to Lucinda's book that I could understand why I smoked in the first place and why I had managed to actually successfully, for the first time in so many years, being able to stop smoking. And that was the penny drop moment of, if we have something that is an addiction that's been caused by, you know, we're not born addicts, we're not born, you know, needing to smoke. And I was so repulsed by myself, and it held me back in so many ways, being this secret smoker. And that was the penny drop moment when I actually for the first time, had successfully managed to stop smoking. And I'm going to share this story with you as well, because this was a huge pivot for me as well in stopping and wanting that audiobook to work and to be successful, because I felt so low and so appalling. Now, a friend of mine is called Sheena, and she organizes these amazing events, and she asked me to be a guest speaker and to talk about like wellness and it was a wellness event, and she wanted me to get up there on stage and give a talk about what I do to be the best version of myself. I knew that I had this dirty little secret, that actually I was a secret smoker. How could I stand up there on a stage and give a talk about wellness when I was doing this? But I didn't have the guts to tell her why I wouldn't do it. Maybe I did end up. I subsequently have told her. Whether I told her at the time, I don't think I did, because I was so ashamed of myself. Anyway, I said, Sheena, I can't do it. And she said, well, would you interview the speakers then and like ask them questions and interview them, because I'd love you to be involved. I was like, yep, I can do that, but I can't get up there and do a talk on wellness. I could now though. Anyway, after that event, I really was desperate for a cigarette. It was quite scary being there, sorry, frog in my throat, being there interviewing people, and I was going home, and then I needed to go into mummy mode where I wouldn't be able to smoke for ages. So on the drive home, I decided to pull over and to hide behind an oak tree and have a cigarette. Now, the man that I just interviewed was a physiotherapist. He also told me during the interview that he loved cycling. And I'm standing behind this tree, and suddenly a cyclist comes past. And my car's on the side of the road, and I'm there, and they look at me and they carry on cycling. And I had this moment of, oh my goodness, that is the man I've just interviewed that has just seen me hiding behind a tree, having a cigarette after this event. And it was a really lovely event. I felt it wasn't the same man, but that's where my head went. I got back in the car and I was just even more ashamed of myself than ever before. And then it was, I don't know, a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, a month later, that Audible served me this audiobook, Alan Carr's Boot Camp to Stop Smoking. And in that boot camp, it talks about all the different types of smokers. It talks about why we convince ourselves that smoking is a good thing, why we convince ourselves, we brainwash ourselves. And it is totally and utterly brainwashing, but you can unbrainwash yourself. And it also talks about not replacing it with anything else, because that had always been my problem. I would replace it with gum. I would replace it with chocolate. I would replace it, and I did this numerous times when I stopped, Buttermintos. Well, I would eat about 20 Buttermintos a day. And oh boy, it's just not good at all. So I thought now was the right time to share this with you, that I have successfully stopped smoking. I hope, and again, I think it's a little bit like AA, it's a day at a time. I hope that I never, ever go back to it. But I finally feel free. Like I don't have that constant buzz. I look back and think, how did you do it? How did you do it for so long? Oh, Charlie. And I do feel that I feel so pleased that I have done it, that I've stopped, that it's not part of my life, and it's not occupying my brain thinking about it the whole time. Because if you've been there with, either cigarettes or something else, you know that it is all consuming. You're constantly thinking about when you can have the next one. Or if you're not, you're replacing it with something else. And yeah, just ultimate. I thought the arm was higher than it was. Anyway, I hope that me sharing this, me having this ramble with you all, will help somebody. And yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you think. I hope it helps, and I hope I try to be really honest. And I think it's really important that when I share things with you all, that I've worked through it, I've come out the other side, and I can share from experience. I'm obviously not a medic. I have no medical background. I am not a therapist. I am just a person that has tried lots of things and found something that worked for me. But it was my husband saying to me, darling, you need to work on your relationship with your father and your feelings to him, about him and about the past, because when he dies it will be really, really hard. And you know, he's in his 70s, it's going to happen, and I want you to be able to cope in the best possible way that you can. And Simon gave me that kick up the backside to actually go and address it. And do you know what? Addressing it with Kate and Estelle was far less painful than I thought it was going to be. I'd put it off for years, dealing with that trauma, because I wanted, it was in the box, and I wanted to keep the lid on the box. I didn't want to open up that lid because it would open up a whole can of worms to my past that I didn't want to go there. But actually, in going there and opening that lid and addressing it has given me freedom in my life to live the best version of my life, to finally be free from the trauma of my past and the thing that I relied on throughout the trauma years that was cigarettes. And if only I had opened the lid of that box years before and dealt with it, I would have been able to stop smoking. But maybe I wasn't ready, who knows. But I wanted to share this with you. I hope it helps. Thank you for listening. Much love, and hopefully I'll see you again soon with a vlog. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.